Congratulations, you have found the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, also known as the Lamb. The Lamb is the largest collective of online movie blogs and podcasts with 2,000 members and counting. Every week on the Lambcast, various members of the Lamb community get together to talk about our favorite subject, movies. So bookmark the Lamb and follow us on social media. Be sure to join us each week to hear a lively discussion of films and movie-related talk from our members. Join the flock at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Lambcast. This week we're going back in time, 26 years to the decade of the 1990s. In 1998 the euro was created as a currency for Europe. President Clinton is caught with his pants down and lies about it. 76 million people watched the last episode of Seinfeld. Frank Sinatra dies, and Viagra is approved by the FDA. Titanic wins a bunch of Academy Awards as the best film of the previous year, and future rivals for Best Picture Saving Private Ryan and Shakespeare in Love are released. We're doing a deep dive on the films of 1998 this week, and we have some springboard champions to do a triple somersault for you. Let's meet them now. He's not some monster trying to evade us, he's just an animal. If you find what he wants, then he'll come to you. Dave Anderson, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
He just way overpaid a scalper for front row tickets to the end of the earth. David Brook, good to have you on the show as well.
No problem. I just can't resist those tickets.
And we're all hoping he'll cure some disease or invent a longer lasting light bulb or something. Brian Eggert.
Thanks for having me.
Finally, at the last minute, they had to drop out. Aaron Neuwirth abides. I don't know about you, but I take comfort in that. It's good knowing he's out there, and he sent his list for me to share. And I can't believe that we knew his name. Some of his best friends don't know his name. Matthew Simpson also sent his list. So we're going to do a round-robin discussion of our films. Everybody brought 5 films, and they have their own reasons for their selections. As we get started, if you have a theme or a reason for your picks, be sure to let us know. I have Matthew and Aaron's lists. Aaron had a reason for each of his picks, but Matthew didn't include any explanation for his, so those should go pretty quickly. Brian, I think we're going to have you first up on the list. So what did you bring with us, and did you have a reason for the picks that you made?
Yeah, I didn't really have a reason. Mine were pretty random. Some are newish discoveries within the last few years that I really love, or stuff that I saw in theaters in 1998. So yeah, no rhyme or reason, just movies in general that I love. So I'll begin with Out of Sight, the Steven Soderbergh film. This sort of began, it was the first Soderbergh film that I saw in the theater, and it really began my obsession with him. I'm a huge fan of his, like most of everything he puts out, with few exceptions. And at the time, he was really known for sort of, sexualizing videotape, and then after that, he didn't. He released a bunch of films that didn't do well financially and were kind of considered failed art house projects, and sort of asked himself, why am I doing this if no one's going to see what I'm doing, and decided to take his first sort of Hollywood assignment. And it's just amazing. It's still one of my favorite films that he's done. It's very slick and based on an Elmore Leonard novel, and this was sort of in the post Tarantino era of Hollywood where everybody wanted to kind of capture that Tarantino magic, and I think that Soderbergh really did it better than anybody else and made it his own. He made a star out of George Clooney with this, who needed a hit after Batman and Robin. I think if Jennifer Lopez wasn't already a star with Selena, it proved that she could act, and it's maybe one of the few examples that she has a lot of potential to be a great actress, and not just sort of in these kind of pop rom-coms that she's usually in, or more recently like pop sci-fi movies on Netflix. And it's just got this really clever nonlinear structure that is more Elmore Leonard-esque than Tarantino-esque, I would say. There's a reason for the way it's structured and for what you're seeing and when you see it. And he introduces these great little like freeze frames that become sort of a Soderbergh signature for this time in his career. And they're really kind of echoing these sort of timeouts between Jack Foley, Clooney's character, who's a professional thief, and Karen Sisco, who's a U.S. Marshal. And then you've just got an amazing cast. I mean, Don Cheadle is a, small guy, but he's really intimidating in this and kind of scary. Albert Brooks is playing sort of a goofy, wealthy guy that they're going to rob at the end. Michael Keaton is reprising his role as Ray Nicolette from Jackie Brown the year before. Steve Zahn is fun, and so is Dennis Farina and Luis Guzman. And then there's like a very sympathetic small Viola Davis role. And she would work with Soderbergh a couple of times again on like Solaris and a few years after this. But it's sort of the beginning of Soderbergh's, cool films and his career-long obsession with heists and thieves. And I think it's genuinely sexy and genuinely romantic. The chemistry between Clooney and Lopez is amazing. And it's just something that I could watch anytime. And I've watched it many, many times since.
Well, before I plug in my views on Out of Sight, let me tell you that Aaron had this on his list, so I'm going to read to you his justification and what he said. He had lists like movies I love, movies I hate, movies that everyone hates that I love, movies that I hate that everyone else loves, that kind of thing. So this he has listed as a movie I love, and here's what he says. There are certainly contenders for my favorite Soderbergh film, but this is really an all-timer for him and one of my favorites in general. A fantastic adaptation of Elmore Leonard's novel, and one that exists in the same universe as Jackie Brown, no less. This is a film that sizzles with terrific chemistry between Clooney and Lopez, crackles with sharp dialogue throughout, and shared by the likes of this fantastic supporting cast. It doesn't get much better than this, from the wonderful score by David Holmes to the editing rhythms that would inform The Limey a year later. As the film has helped Soderbergh figure out his way back into mainstream film territory, although he kept experimenting, Out of Sight is pretty perfect. So he sounds like he's echoing everything that you have to say, and I would not disagree with either of you about this. This is a terrific movie. I love Albert Brooks in this movie. He's great. He's very funny. Steve Zahn, he's just at his Steve Zahnest. He's just funny character. And Don Cheadle is creepy, scary. I love the sequence where Jennifer Lopez is visiting the one house, and I forget the thug that she encounters, and he
Washington.
He wants to tussle, and she takes out her iron rod and smacks him down with it, and she says, "Yeah, you want to tussle? We'll tussle," and she just kicks his ass, and I love that. That was a great sequence. And Dennis Farina is welcome all the time. My favorite sequence is the one with Jennifer Lopez and George Clooney in the trunk of the car.
I also love that Dennis Farina scene where he confronts Michael Keaton's character.
Mm-hmm.
He's married at that point, but he's dating Jennifer Lopez's character, and just the way that Dennis Farina kind of confronts him as like a protective father is such a beautiful, funny moment. He's so good. He had that sort of comeback in the 90s, Farina, and he's kind of disappeared since then. But this is just a great example of how diverse he could be.
Well, either of our Davids have some opinion about Out of Sight while we're talking about it?
Oh, I just kind of echo what you guys have said. I haven't seen it for a while, but it was one of these films that I had on DVD when I was first kind of collecting them, and I've watched it countless times back in the early 2000s. I've got a lot of love for the film, but it's been far too long. I need to rewatch it, but it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen it. It's one of those movies where every time it's mentioned, I thought, well, yeah, I like that one, and I always meant to get around to watching it. But listening to you guys talking about it again, I need to sit and watch it again. I like Soderbergh when he works with ensemble casts. I think he's better at juggling ensemble casts than anybody. And yeah.
I saw this at a TCM Film Festival with Ann V. Coates as the guest, and she was talking about it. And it was a terrific talk that she did. She's moved on to the next world, as they say, and it was close to maybe 1 or 2 years before she passed away. And it was fun that she liked this film very much. I think she had a good time doing the editing and following the guidelines that Soderbergh had set up for her.
Interesting.
All right. Well, Dave Anderson, we're going to have you go next. So what did you bring, and do you have a reason for it?
Yeah. None of the 5 films on my list are, rank among my all-time favorites. Well, one kind of. But these are movies that I thought were, for one reason or another, overshadowed by other films that year. And my first one is from my favorite genre, which is the disaster movie, which made it kind of a brief comeback in the 90s. And this film, Deep Impact, was pretty much, it was a big hit, but it was overshadowed by Armageddon, released later that summer. It has the exact same premise, but Armageddon to me was made with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. And some of the aesthetic aspects of Deep Impact are a little bit dated, but the important thing that I think it does well, especially in a genre that's got kind of a dubious reputation, is it makes its scenario at least seem plausible. I'm not saying it is, but at least while we're watching, we think it is. And because of this, of all the disaster type films released during the 90s, this one remains the best one. Certainly smarter than Armageddon. And the premise is simple. Earth is given about a year to live unless something can be done to divert a massive comet that'll pretty much end everything. And so a crew of astronauts is sent into space to land on the surface of the comet and plant thermonuclear charges, which will hopefully change its course. But they only succeed in blowing off one chunk, so now there's 2 comets heading towards the Earth. And that was my favorite part of the film, because that means, yep, at least one of them is going to hit. And, that's what I pay my 2 bits for in a disaster movie. Not for everyone to breathe a sigh of relief after a near miss. And so, like I said, the special effects are a little bit antiquated, but I do love the scene where that first comet hits and New York is taken out by a tsunami. It's got a fairly decent cast that have a little more depth than the typical disaster movie stock characters, although I think Téa Leoni was really miscast in this one. There aren't any real antagonists in the film that put other people's life in jeopardy to save their own asses, and there's no idiots ignoring the problem, and there's no hordes of extras reacting in panic. And a part of me misses those stock characters, but considering the genre, this is a pretty somber and serious take on what's basically a popcorn formula. And again, it just that this one, even though it was a big hit, is overshadowed by Armageddon. Still kind of sticks in my craw because Armageddon is a dumpster fire.
Well, I like Deep Impact quite well. It has Robert Duvall in it, so that always makes it something that's worth seeing. And
he's great in it.
Yeah, he's just iconic, and he should be an astronaut. He should have been. It just feels like he should have been John Glenn. So he fits into the movie pretty well. And this is Elijah Wood before he went to Middle Earth. He was a young kid, right. Doing this movie. And this movie got to us first. They beat Armageddon to the theaters by like 2 or 3 months. And that happens sometimes. We've got several instances over the years where films with basically the same premise are opening within just a couple of months of each other. And it always helps to be first, but in this particular case, it didn't seem to make a difference because the Michael Bay Armageddon goes way over the top. We'll be talking about Armageddon in a couple of minutes because Aaron has some thoughts on that one.
This one also has a great James Horner score. Pretty underrated. It does evoke memories of Titanic. It's very similar to that score in a lot of ways.
All right. Well, Matthew is not with us. He sent a He sent his list, but he didn't really send a reason for the list or any comments on it. So if you guys have seen the films that we're going to be talking about, I would appreciate some feedback on it. There's one or two of them that I've seen, but others I have not. And the first one that he has on his list is one that I haven't seen, and that's The Red Violin.
I the Red Violin with Sam Jackson, right? So
yes.
I think that's a Cassie Lemon's film. That's her second film after Eve's Bayou.
I have the director as Francois Girard.
Maybe I'm thinking of something else. Oh yeah, I am thinking of something else.
I mean, well, I think it wasn't remade. I think it was remade.
It might have been.
Yeah. So I think there are two versions, but I think he's talking about the original. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's remade. Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking of Caveman's Valentine, which
also has
a similar.
Samuel Jackson.
Yeah, it's a similar poster, and I always get and he's like a musician in that.
Right.
So, yeah. Anyway.
I can see why they could be easily conflated.
Yeah.
I know, maybe it wasn't remade. Sorry, I'm just looking it up and I'm getting mixed it with something else completely.
Well,
we're also good at our jobs.
Well, this looks like it's set over the course of 3 different centuries. So, and there are probably episodes that take place in each of these eras involving the violin. So it's kind of an anthology story following the violin throughout history. I don't know anything about it. Like I said, I didn't see it. It looked intriguing. I did hear very positive things. I remember that the soundtrack, which is full of classical music, of course, was a big seller, and it was like the #1 classical film or #1 classical album of the year. It did good business for whoever was making the music, at least. I don't know that it did good business at the theater. Obviously, it didn't get my $10. Sorry to say.
I do vaguely you're following this one violin, right, from several times throughout history. I vaguely remember watching this in the 90s, but I obviously don't remember it very well. So yeah, something good to add to the watch list.
All right. Well, we heard from Aaron already about what the movie was that he loved. David Brook, it's your turn. What have you got for us, and have you got a reason?
Right. Yeah. Well. My reason's my usual reason of I use this as an excuse to go through my unwatched pile of discs and just dove in really. So yeah, and especially this time I've kind of quite often people make a list of sort of favourites and films that I really love, but as I say, because this was a bit of a random, I'm just watching stuff that I haven't seen. So my list is pretty random. I just dove in to whatever was in my collection that I haven't watched yet that was from 1998. And it's a bit of a mixed bag this time, so I wouldn't say I fully recommend, maybe 1 or 2 of them. But they're all interesting titles, so I think they're worth talking about. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a film called Serpent's Path. So this is directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa, and the film came about. It's quite an interesting premise behind it. I don't know the full details, but from what I gather, he received a bizarre offer to make 2 films in 2 weeks on a low budget using the same cast, and he also wanted to use the same premise. So he basically kind of made a film and remade it instantly and made these both in the space of a couple of weeks, which is sheer madness if you've ever tried to make a film, but he did it. He pulled it off. I didn't get around to watching the second film, unfortunately, but I did watch Serpent's Path. It's a very dark story that tells the tale of Miyashita, who's played by Teruyuki Kagawa. Excuse my pronunciations. And he's like a low-level yakuza, like a gangster. And what has happened? His daughter has been raped and murdered. And with the help of this strange friend Najima, who we're not quite sure why he's helping him, but they kidnap a Yakuza member who they believe is responsible for the killing to take a kind of brutal revenge. But as things go on, and you start to realize that Miyashita's as disturbed as any of the killers of his daughter. Like he's just been, this incident has just made him snap. But then the film makes some unusual twists, because you start to realise that the guy they've kidnapped, they think they don't actually think he did it. It might be someone else. So it kind of unleashes like a chain of kidnappings and tortures and things, and that all go a bit horribly wrong. And it goes on from there. And yeah, it's a very interesting film. It's a very unusual film. The tone doesn't always work for me. It's very odd. I say there's a little bit of dark comedy in there, but then obviously the premise is so disturbing. It's hard to laugh at anything. And it purposefully kind of refuses to sensationalize, not kind of glorify any of the violence or kind of make it sexy or anything like that. It's all done pretty grittily and grimily, and matter of factly, and it's quite an odd thing, but it just didn't. I don't know. There's something just didn't quite fully gel. I think part of it was it didn't hit me emotionally. Like, you expect from what happened to this main character that this would be really kind of a emotionally powerful kind of film, but it was so unusual and so odd, and because the guy is kind of pretty off his rocker to begin with, the father figure, that it's just didn't quite hit me emotionally. But it is a fascinating film. I was glad I finally dug it out from my collection, because it's been gathering dust for a while.
Do you have the other one, The Eyes of the Spider?
I do. They're actually released together on like a one DVD set, and I meant to watch the other one, but I just ran out of time, and I thought I'll watch something else first, because that was quite grim. I was like, I don't really want to jump right into that world straight away, so I just kept avoiding it, and then I ran out of time. So no, but yeah, I'll have to check it out. I'm still intrigued by the other one.
Yeah, the idea that they did them both in 2 weeks, and that one is basically a remake of the film that he just made.
Yeah, or at least the premise. I think it kind of keeps the same premise, and it goes off in quite different directions, but it does sound quite similar.
Interesting idea. Interesting. Well, I always appreciate when you bring these films in, because they're definitely outside of my field of focus, so to speak. And I've checked in on a few of them.
Nice.
I think my next film is going to be, or my first film is going to be the one that is most likely to have been seen by everybody. It was a very popular film. It did good business, and it's my favorite film of 1998. And when I say it's my favorite, that doesn't mean that I think it's the best film of 1998. Every year when I do my top 10 list, I basically use a completely subjective criteria based on what I liked and enjoyed the most during the year. And in 1998, The Mask of Zorro was the film that I enjoyed the most. I'm a swashbuckler guy. I loved The Adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn is my favorite movie of all time. And so when we get this movie featuring swordplay with Antonio Banderas and Anthony Hopkins, I just don't see how it wasn't going to work for me at all. It worked great, and it's got a terrific cast. Catherine Zeta-Jones is in this movie, and they have a kind of a clever plot that they've developed here with the villain adopting the daughter of his antagonist, and that becomes a focal point of the story. And the previous Zorro kind of taking on an apprentice, becoming a mentor, and basically creating his own replacement. I like that idea, and it was done by Martin Campbell, who reinvigorated James Bond twice, so it worked for me really well, and I must have seen this movie a dozen times in the last 26 years. It's one that it's maybe, I won't say it's the last Laserdisc that I got. Laserdisc stopped being made regularly in the U.S. in 1999, and they did them for a couple more years in Japan. But this was a '98 film. It came, and so the Laserdisc came out in '99, and it was maybe the last new disc that I bought. Whenever I watch it, I prefer to watch it on Laserdisc.
Yeah, that's one of my comfort food movies. I like that one.
Yeah, it's an easy one to get into and enjoy.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I must admit as well, an interesting side note for me on this film is that I guess it must have been 1999, I actually used the film for a college, I don't know, maybe not a thesis is probably the wrong word because it's college rather than, well, what we call college is just before you go to university. But I did like an essay on the use of language in the film, bizarrely. I was comparing the use of language in the Mask of Zorro with the 1940s Mark of Zorro.
Mark of Zorro. Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that was a bit of a random tangent.
Did you save that paper?
I probably not.
I'd be interested to read it.
Yeah.
All right, I won't make you go back into your own personal history on that. But I do like that side note. Anytime people tell me a story about their life and the way it relates to movies, that's kind of my bailiwick. I really like that kind of stuff. So David, don't be shy about sharing those kinds of stories. I appreciate it.
Richard, do you like the sequel? I really like The Mask of Zorro, but I've never seen the sequel.
The sequel is okay. It didn't work quite as well for me, and I can't remember what the reasons were. I think I've only seen it once or twice. I saw it when it came out in theaters. I was very excited to see it, and I don't want to say I was disappointed, but I think maybe because my expectations were so high from the first one that it was hard for me to enjoy the second one quite as well. I should probably give it another chance. I do remember it having some fun moments to it, but I don't remember it that well. Brian, we're back to you.
Okay. The second one that I guess this is just something that I've discovered in the last few years. Watched for the first time about 2 years before I think Criterion put it out, and it's the first Dogma 95 feature, which is The Celebration by Thomas Vinterberg. So if you're, familiar with Dogma 95, they're looking to kind of shed Hollywood aesthetics and creating a set of obstructions for themselves to make movies, and so they don't use studio props or post-synchronized sound or any non-diegetic sound. The rule is that they have to use color and like a Academy aspect ratio and handheld cameras, and they can't have any sort of gimmicky devices such as like murders or guns or stuff like that. And this is a story that is drawn from fact or alleged fact about a kind of a wealthy family that wealthy Danish family where they're having a 60th birthday party for the patriarch, and the oldest son stands up and kind of confesses to everyone that their father, who they're honoring, has been raping the kids for as long as he could remember. And they had a sibling who killed herself because of what was going on, and everyone's in kind of denial that this is going on. And the way the party reacts to that news is sort of like, is this a joke? And it just becomes, the whole party just sort of unfolds in really disturbing ways, not only for what he's saying, but for how people are responding. And it's really just kind of an indictment of patriarchal entitlement and Danish racism, and how they deal with matters of incest and pedophilia, which I guess are kind of rampant in Danish, at least elitist culture, according to Vinterberg at the time. It's, despite really being a really kind of heavy thematic film in terms of what it's talking about, it's actually just wildly funny and really entertaining and really energetically put together. And it doesn't, I don't think any Dogma 95 feature, and there's been many of them, really follows all the rules. Like there's kind of a ghost element in this film that sort of breaks its own rule in terms of like, quote, superficial action, which is barred by the Dogma 95 rules. But I find it just really engaging. One of those films where it's like it just punches you in the gut and you feel like you're different after you've watched it, because it's such a visceral and funny and disturbing experience that just kind of leaves you poured out afterward.
Yeah, yes. I saw this for the first time just a few years ago, and yeah, I was blown away. It's a superb film, really, really, really good. No, I'm with you all the way on this one.
Great.
Well, I never saw it, but when my oldest daughter, was in college, she had an instructor who assigned it as a film to watch for the screenwriting class that she was taking, and we struggled to find it. It was one of those things. I think we went to the library, we went to video rental stores. Remember, this is when video rental stores still existed. This was before streaming, and I don't remember how we finally got a hold of it. But I know that she did watch it. I did not see it, so but it was something that she was supposed to write about. And when she explained to me the premise and all the things that are going on, I said, "Oh, that sounds like a cheerful film."
Yeah, right. I mean, I think it's the best Dogma 95 feature because like their whole idea is to sort of react to like the mediocrity and like elitism of European and American cinema. So it's really like taking that idea and putting it into a narrative form better than really any other subsequent Dogma 95 film does. So it's I don't know. For me, it's like this perfect form follows function film that really captures the spirit of that brief odd movement in cinema in the 90s.
Well, thank you, Dave Anderson. What spirit are you bringing with you on the next one?
Well, I'm bringing something that, compared to Brian's choice, is pretty brain dead, but I did enjoy it. And this one is one that I think was supposed to be a blockbuster, but it was released in the January dumping ground, and almost no one went and saw it. And I can vouch for that because when my wife and I went and saw it, I think we were one of 4 people in the theater. And it's Hard Rain, which has Christian Slater and Morgan Freeman in it. It's sort of a hybrid crime thriller and disaster movie, which is what made me want to see it. With Slater as an armored car trainee learning the ropes from his uncle, who's played briefly by Ed Asner. And while they're making a pickup in a small town, which is being evacuated due to flood, Freeman and his crew are trying to rob this armored car, but Slater escapes with the money. And a lot of the movie takes place as this town is getting more and more submerged with the dam about to break at any time. So it's a lot of it's a cat and mouse chase through and around town with the water getting deeper. I especially liked a ridiculous jet ski chase through the halls of an elementary school. If nothing else, that scene alone is worth it. And I can attest as a jet ski owner that you can't do that. But, and also, there's Randy Quaid is in this as a burnt out sheriff who for a while is trying to get people to evacuate, but he ends up being the true antagonist of the film and decides he wants the money too. And I don't know how many of you have ever seen the movie Lake Placid.
Yeah.
And my favorite part of Lake Placid was Betty White's character. And she's in this, and it feels like her role as this nitpicking wife is sort of a dry run for the role that she would do in Lake Placid. Not quite as foul-mouthed, but she is fun in this. And of course, the dam does break during the climax, and the special effects and destruction are really entertaining, and they're as convincing as any of the other blockbusters released later that year. But again, it didn't do all that well. It's been mostly forgotten, but it plays pretty good at home, and it moves fast enough that we don't really notice a lot of the lapses in logic. And compared to the other 1998 films, it's dumb, but it's not Godzilla Armageddon dumb. So,
well, Aaron had it on his list, and he's got it as a movie I like that is squarely in the middle. And I'll give you his comments.
I was actually considering putting this on my list too because it's the first movie I ever reviewed for my high school paper. And so it's got a special place. I watched it a few years ago and it held up pretty well. Yeah, it's a good like late night. You put it on at midnight and you'll stay up watching the whole thing. Yeah, I enjoy this movie.
Well, here's what Aaron said. If I'm thinking about a movie that I just like without being over the moon for it, but wouldn't feel like I needed to go for that far to defend it either, look no further than Hard Rain. It's a box office flop that attempts to combine low-key disaster story with a heist flick for a perfectly serviceable action film that Morgan, I Just Want the Money Freeman, is way too qualified for. He and Christian Slater and Minnie Driver do what they can to hold it together. All of this in mind, it has several solid water-based action sequences, which includes lots of uses of jet skis. So, what's not to like here?
Summed it up perfectly.
Yeah.
Well, as you were talking, I was looking at his comments. I said, yeah, that sounds like it's just one of those movies that it exists, you can enjoy it while you're watching it, and you're not going to think too hard about it.
Sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah, Matthew's next film, by the way, The Red Violin was directed by, I mentioned before, Francois Girard. The writer on it is Don McKellar. The next film on Matthew's list was directed by Don McKellar, and it's called Last Night. Have any of you seen this?
Nope. I haven't.
Yeah.
I think I did. I can't remember.
Canadian movie, right?
Yeah, and well, I think Matthew does that. Which is perfectly fine. It's an end of the world film, as I recall. It's like everybody's sitting around waiting for the end of the world. I don't know if there's a reason, if it's a comet or the Earth's going to explode, but they all seem to know, like there's a countdown of 6 more hours. There's even a phrase, I think, for the movie. The punchline is something like, it's not the end of the world, there's still 6 hours left.
I think the only reason I ever saw this was because I think David Cronenberg has a role in it.
Yeah.
And I was looking up David Cronenberg and was like, oh, he's in this. So, but yeah, it has, Don McKellar was in, I think, Existence and the next year with Cronenberg. So, yeah. I think Sarah Polley's in it too, isn't she?
Yes, she is. It looks like there are a lot of Canadian actors in the film, and I'm sure that it's an interesting concept, I guess. I haven't even watched the trailer. Like I said, I just saw this morning that he sent the list. He didn't give a reason. I just looked it up quick and it looks intriguing, and it's not that long.
Based on your description, it sounds like an Australian film I reviewed a few years ago called These Final Hours. But End of the World, it's on my watch list now.
There you go. All those end of the world films we ought to be watching. This fits right in with Armageddon and Deep Impact.
Yeah, what was it about? I guess everyone was scared of Y2K coming.
Well, that was the inspiration for the film. He was inspired to write something about the millennium, and but he didn't want it to be out of date 3 years later. So he wrote it in a more generic way, which I think probably makes it fun. And let's see. Aaron's next movie is a movie he hates, and I'm not sure that anybody is going to disagree with this one. If this is on your list of films that you really treasure, I apologize for Aaron's hatred of it, but we'll go ahead and say it. The movie he hates is Godzilla. He says, as a massive Godzilla fan, no joy comes from me having to relive any aspect of this wild misfire from Roland Emmerich. Following up his hit Independence Day, which I've always enjoyed, the biggest issue is clear. Emmerich doesn't care for Godzilla, and he said as much before signing on, and it shows. Every attempt to capture the magic of ID4, let alone other spectacle films of the 90s, fails here. Between the unmemorable cast, poor script, rain-soaked CG sequences, and other misguided choices. I understand there's a small audience out there that likes to say, if you just look at this as a monster movie and not necessarily Godzilla, it's fine. To them I say, no, it's not fine. It's not fine at all. It's still a poor attempt to one-up Jurassic Park by way of bad attempt at reviving a Toho classic, Hollywood style. Note, long live the Monsterverse.
No, I didn't hate it. It's not a Godzilla movie, but I didn't hate it.
Well, I didn't hate it when I first saw it, but I think we watched it again. It may have been a movie of the month 7 or 8 years ago. I can't remember why I watched it again, and boy, is it bad.
Yeah, I'm not defending it as a good movie, but we went and saw it in the theater, and it's good and loud, and my fillings were loose afterwards, but it doesn't hold up to repeated viewings. But as a big screen, big dumb popcorn movie, it was okay. I had higher hopes for it because of Independence Day as well.
Yeah, I think everybody did, and it had kind of a funky trailer where you're seeing the museum with the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton in it, and all the kids are looking at it, and then you hear a roar, and you see Godzilla's foot come in through the top of the museum and squash the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton, and you go, oh, this ought to be fun, and they had some, what was the promo? Size matters.
Yeah,
that was their tagline.
The hype surrounding this one was huge.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a book, a fascinating book called The Gross, which is about the year 1998 in Hollywood movies, and they go into a lot of detail about that film in particular, that the overhype might have actually been part of its downfall at the box office. Because you couldn't escape those trailers. It was on the sides of buses. It was everywhere.
Yeah, it was. There was a hype machine that you would think they'd have learned from The Last Action Hero, but nope, they kept going. David Brook, it's your turn.
Right, yeah, okay. So my next film is Samurai Fiction. This is a film I was really excited about because I'm a big samurai movie fan. I love East Asian cinema in general. As you'll see from this list, there's quite a few. And yeah, it tells the story of kind of a young noble samurai, but a bit of a wild card. Like he's a bit fiery, and he's searching for a thief who's stolen a precious treasure and also killed one of his people, one of his clansmen. So he's on a kind of a wild trip for vengeance to track this guy down and kill him and get revenge. But along the way, he meets an older samurai who tries to deter him from the violence. He tries to teach him not to be violent. But you also realize that this older samurai, although he's teaching peace, he's actually a really skilled samurai, and the young samurai is actually pretty rubbish. So he needs some training before he goes out on his revenge anyway, and it kind of goes on from there. This is a film I was really excited about watching. Actually, I bought it quite recently. I can always remember when Kill Bill came out. There were a lot of people saying that Quentin Tarantino got a couple of ideas and things from Samurai Fiction. He is a film he championed, and so I've always wanted to watch it, but it never. I don't think it ever got released in the UK. Or at least I never saw it ever released in the UK. So I never got around to watching it. Back when it came out, I couldn't afford to import it. But a couple of months ago, I found it in a car boot sale, just like there for like 50p or something on DVD. I was like, yes. So I bought it, and it was 1998, fit the podcast, so I went for it. And I'm sad to say this was the biggest disappointment of my list of 5 films today. It has its moments. It's very stylish. And some of these kind of stylized moments, especially famously on the cover, it's got this kind of, because it's shot in black and white mostly, but there's a couple of flashes of color, and specifically this near the start, it uses great use of silhouette against like bold colors like red and things, and those scenes are really nice. And there's some nice little references to kind of earlier samurai films and the Kurosawa films and things like that. But overall, for one, it's too long. It's almost 2 hours, and this story is way too slight to justify this, so it ends up trudging along a little bit. Also, it's got way more comedy than expected. It's actually more of a comedy action movie, and the comedy is really goofy and doesn't really work. I kind of have I quite enjoy I quite enjoy a lot of the Hong Kong comedies. They're really goofy too, but I don't know, it gets away with it. It has a certain charm, but here it just didn't work. I was wanting proper hardcore samurai action, and I just didn't get it. And speaking of the action scenes again as well, they were okay. They were kind of, but they were shot too much in a bit of a music video style. And the director, Hiroyuki Nakano, he was from a music video background, and it shows a little too much, which means the film has dated a little bit, even though some of the stylish touches are nice. Some of the others look a bit too much like MTV from the late 90s, and it was a big disappointment. So yeah, a bit of a shame, this one, but I'm glad I finally got a chance to watch it. And it does pick up. The final act is quite exciting. It's quite cool. There's some good action in there, but overall it was a bit of a letdown, unfortunately.
Well, given that it was a letdown, I'm glad you only paid 50 pence for it.
Yeah.
Nobody else has seen this, have they?
I have not. No.
Nope.
All right. Just checking. Didn't want to cut anybody off if they had opposing views on this. Well, my next film has my favorite Billy Bob Thornton performance in it from 1998, and it's not Armageddon.
Thank God.
I think I had this on my list too. That was my next
A Simple Plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, Simple Plan is a terrific Sam Raimi thriller that is so incredibly sad. It's basically like The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, and you know how self-defeating that one was. This is even more depressingly self-defeating, and it's a combination of bad decisions every step along the way, making things worse and worse and worse as they go. And Billy Bob Thornton plays Bill Paxton's brother, and he's a sad sack case whose life is just not going well. And they have some moments interacting with each other, Bill Paxton's character Hank and his brother Jacob, that are really just heartbreaking. And the story is got violence in it, and there's it involves a group of friends who find a cache of money in a crashed plane, and they're trying to figure out how to keep it and get away with it, and nobody can kind of agree to how it's going to work, and it always gets complicated when these things happen. And those questions that you ask people about their morality, what would you do, in a particular situation, it always changes when it's sitting on the kitchen table in front of you, what you would actually do. And this is a movie that is like that. And like I said, I've been a fan of Billy Bob Thornton since Sling Blade, and this is just one of those great performances. He's got some funky teeth that he wears in the movie, but his character feels very real, and like I said, incredibly sad. And the resolution of the movie is, given the conversations that have happened during the film, the resolution of the movie is really a downer, and it's really nicely made. But somebody else said they had it on their list, so I'll give you a chance to talk about it too.
Yeah, I had it on my list. I think I'm, as a Minnesotan, I'm somewhat obligated to talk about this because it was shot in Minnesota, and it seems like, they use local news talent and whatnot, so it's kind of not too many films are shot in Minnesota, so whenever one is shot here, it becomes like, I don't know, there's a sense of ownership over it, I think, in the community, which is a little silly, but whatever. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a really sharply written story. The author, Scott Smith, only wrote two books, this and The Ruins, which is another kind of really good isolated story about people caught on a sort of a horrific situation in Mexico, but that's a different movie. So yeah, echoing everything you said about Billy Bob Thornton being sort of this very sad character. He's very moving. I think that, at least from my perspective, the Minnesotan-ness of it is dead on, and we've kind of seen some of that echoed in Fargo, the TV show, actually, where it's really capturing how everyone in Minnesota sort of puts on a nice face, and you're expected to keep up appearances and have a respectable presentation and be sort of a respectable family, yet behind that there's this greed and kind of awful potential. And maybe that's true of everyone, but it just seems more potent in Minnesota, where we have this thing called Minnesota Nice, where you pretend to be nice and really you're just like, swearing under your breath or putting on a different face. And I think that's really evident in like the Bill Paxton and Bridget Fonda characters. He's just sort of this pathetic guy in a working at doing like the accounting for a feed mill, and she's just sort of a housewife who's pregnant, and those are very standard roles that they're keeping up, yet the first thing they want to do when they find this money is keep it and find out what they have to do to keep it. And it's, if I recall, it's not even that much money. Like it's a life-changing amount of money for them, but it's not like a ridiculous amount of money. It's not tens of millions of dollars, if I recall. So it kind of makes those stakes even more desperate and more, in the end, pathetic. And yeah, I think this is kind of one of the first films where Sam Raimi is sort of shedding his Evil Dead, Dark Man aesthetic, and he's really just telling the story as it should be told. Like there's no really wild touches of form that he's deploying here. It's all pretty staid and pretty straightforward presented. And I think between this and The Gift a few years later, it shows that he's capable of just really embracing the material and embracing a good screenplay. So yeah, I really love this film. It's not just because I'm Minnesotan. It's just because it's a very well crafted thriller.
Shall we count that as your turn on the next go round and we move on to Dave, or do you want to give us another film before we get going?
No, we don't have to. This podcast will be long enough.
Yeah. All right, Dave Anderson, then it's your turn next.
Okay, you, Richard, mentioned Saving Private Ryan and Shakespeare in Love at the beginning of the podcast, this being the year of those two movies. And it's those two movies that overshadowed my next choice, which is Elizabeth. And like those two movies, it was nominated for a lot of Oscars, including Best Picture and Cate Blanchett for Best Actress. But, that was the year that either people were talking about Saving Private Ryan or Shakespeare in Love around Oscar season. And this one just seemed to be kind of forgotten. And I didn't see the movie back then. In fact, I recently watched it for the first time to do a 4K disc review. And I was watching it more out of obligation than interest. But after finally seeing it, I think overall it might be a better film than both of them. The pacing is great. It's got an intriguing story, and the performances are terrific, especially Blanchett in the title role. At the very least, I think this one deserved a Best Picture Oscar over Shakespeare in Love, which did win. I don't know if this movie is an accurate depiction of Queen Elizabeth I's reign, and I don't really care either. It's a fascinating story. It's got a lot of betrayal and murder, and a final act to me that reminded me, in a little bit of The Godfather, where Elizabeth's trying to solidify her reign, her throne, by trying to dispatch numerous enemies, even those close to her. But it was a big surprise to me. I found this movie wonderfully entertaining and rewatchable.
I like the comparison that you make there to The Godfather, because just a couple of years later we got the sequel to it, which was Elizabeth the Golden Age?
Golden Age,
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one yet.
So now you have something to look forward to. I remember the movie. I saw it when it came out. I remember being impressed by it, but I don't remember having the same reaction that you're having about how you thought in the long run it was superior to the other two films that are frequently mentioned here. I do remember it having a pretty impressive cast, mostly, English actors that you see in the usual English actor films. it's you got Joseph Fiennes and Jeffrey Rush, and was Richard Attenborough in this movie? I'm trying to
Yeah, he
remember.
was in
Yeah.
that, and then Daniel Craig in an early role too.
Yeah. Yeah, I can remember enjoying it more than expected. I'm not a fan of period dramas, because I'm British. We make too many of them,
Yes,
and it annoys
I
me.
remember
So,
this about you.
yeah, so I don't really like them. But this one I can remember enjoying it. It's, I think partly because it purposefully goes against the grain of the period dramas that were kind of being released at the time. It's much tougher and more stylish. And yeah, I can remember enjoying it, but I've not seen it since the cinema, so I can't really remember much. But I do remember being surprised by how much I enjoyed it. But I haven't seen the sequel though. But I don't think that's supposed to be particularly great.
I think the sequel was also quite good, and another one that I saw one time, but that was 20 years ago, and I don't have a vivid memory of it. So they were definitely quality productions. I do remember that they looked quite spectacular, and like I said, the casts are very impressive. Well, Matthew's next film is one that we covered here on the Lambcast a couple of years ago. It came up, I think, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks ago as a conversation subject when we were talking about horror pictures, and that's Cube, which is a low-budget horror film with a special effects premise from 1998. 6 people find themselves trapped in this strange prison. It's a giant cube with it's almost like a Rubik's cube with endless numbers of squares that you can move into, and their goal is to try to escape. But a lot of the little cubes that they move into are booby trapped and result in death and dismemberment in interesting ways, and that's really what the film is all about. And like I said, we covered this on Movie of the Month for October. I want to say it was 2021, 2022. So it's a couple of years ago, folks. If you're interested, you could go look that up. I liked it quite well, and it's going to come up again in our discussion later on. Don't try and guess why. But has anybody else seen this?
Yeah, I've seen it numerous times. It's one of my favorite low-budget discoveries back then because I found it on a whim at a video store. It's one of those movies that manages to accomplish a lot with very little. The performances are kind of questionable, but I just love the premise.
I was just about to say that because I can remember when it was kind of just coming out, more when it was coming out on VHS and DVD. There was a lot of hype about it, and so I dug it out straight away. But I can always remember liking most of it, but the performances always really put me off. I don't know. I want to revisit the film and trying to ignore them, but they did put me off at the time. I can always remember thinking, oh, it's okay, but it wasn't as good as everyone's making out. But it was mainly just those performances.
Yeah, I echo that. I mean, I remember watching it back when it came out on VHS or whatever, and I reviewed it a few years, maybe like 10 years ago at this point. But yeah, I think maybe the hang up for me was just the production values. Like, it's trying to do more than it can with its budget, and it's like, I think it was shot for like $350 million or something like that, and
not 350 million. That's not what you meant.
Or 350,000. I'm sorry. No, not 350 million. But I do like. I'm always interested by Vincenzo Natali. I think he, he's always working in sort of sci-fi horror realm, and is always making interesting movies. But there's, I don't know, something about this and kind of all of his work just sort of fails to hit for me for whatever reason. But I'm always, interested in what he's doing because, as you guys have said, it's a great premise. But for whatever reason, it just didn't all come together for me.
I think what I loved most about it, and I like the production values of it. I thought it was quite creative. But what I love most about it is that at no time does it offer any real explanations for anything, because it ultimately it doesn't really matter.
Sure.
It just doesn't matter. It Just doesn't matter. Well, Aaron's next movie is, he says, it's a movie I love that everyone hates. And I don't know if everyone hates it. He says that himself. It's called The Big Hit. And he says, I'd argue hate is a strong word because I suspect more people aren't even aware of this film as opposed to dislike it. That said, it was a modest hit at best that received poor reviews at the time. In actuality, it's one of the best efforts Hollywood was able to deliver in terms of matching the energy of Hong Kong action films of the 80s and 90s. This Mark Wahlberg starring film features the rapper underwear model turned actor as a hitman who doesn't like the idea of people not liking him. It features bizarre humor, sitcom-level comedy situations, over-the-top melodrama, and a lot of pretty killer action for a film this size. I have a lot of fun with it, enjoy the variety of performances here from Elliot Gould to Lou Diamond Phillips, and find that anyone who gets the energy it's going for can easily get on board.
I almost put that one on my list.
Did you?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I went to the theater to see it, and with no expectations. We just wanted to go out and go to the movies, and I thought it was a lot of fun. And I thought Lou Diamond Phillips was great in it. I mean, that's some serious scenery chewing in that movie that he does.
Well, I saw it in a theater when it opened. I remember that. I remember almost nothing about it. The only thing I remember is that they had a hip-hop version of Staying Alive in the soundtrack. And I'm a big Bee Gees fan, so I said, okay, that's kind of interesting. But that's literally all I remember about the movie.
You guys are all making me want to watch it now. I think I avoided it because of the reviews, but hearing that it's inspired by Hong Kong action movies and things like that, I'm going to track this down. I need to watch it.
Well, it sounds like it's right up your alley. Yeah.
It's a consciously quirky movie, and I do love the running gag about the VHS tape he hasn't returned to the video store.
That doesn't date it, does it?
It's been years since I've seen this, but I am on the side of not liking this one at all. I tend to not be in the Mark Wahlberg camp, and I just, unless he's intentionally playing somebody who's really dumb, I find him very unconvincing. So like, he's great in Boogie Nights and he's great in The Departed, but he's one of the few actors where I just don't buy really anything he's doing unless he's playing dumb for some reason. And I guess he plays dumb in this movie, but really I don't know. It just didn't work for me. But it's been more than 20 years since I've seen this.
So there we have it. A little bit of love and a little bit of hate for The Big Hit. David Brook, what's next on your list?
Right, the next on my list, there's more, this one here hopefully has more of a chance of someone have seen this. And in fact, because of its history, it may be on somebody's list, but we shall see. But yeah, the next film I'm going to talk about is The Last Broadcast. Now, this is a film that's kind of mainly just famous for being the film that beat Blair Witch Project to the kind of being the kind of first found footage horror. Well, a lot of people could argue it's Cannibal Holocaust, but that takes a bit of a different approach. But the kind of the first of the new boom of, well, new boom, the late 90s, early 2000s boom of found footage horror movies. But yeah, when Blair Witch Project came out, there were quite a lot of people saying, oh yeah, but this low budget indie movie already did this, but it didn't it wasn't as famous, didn't make anywhere near as much money. But it still was surprisingly successful because this was an incredibly cheap film. I mean, Blair Witch was done cheap and made loads of money, but this reportedly only cost $900 to make, which is madness. Although when you listen to some of the special features, it sounds like they bought a lot of new computer equipment, which in my head would have cost more than that alone. But I guess they didn't class that as part of the budget. But yeah, it's basically about it's more of a kind of mockumentary than a found footage, really. It's presented as a kind of a documentary about a TV crew who are trying to do a live broadcast to find out about the mythical Jersey Devil, and they go out into the woods, and only one of them comes back. And the one that comes back, everyone presumes is the killer of the others, and he's put in jail and all this kind of thing. And the documentary is examining the situation, examining what really happened in the woods that night. So yeah, The Last Broadcast. This was a film that actually I'd heard quite mixed things about, so I wasn't sure where I was going to go with this. And but for the most part, I was quite drawn to it. It's very rough around the edges, and it has a very cheesy kind of dated documentary style, but that totally works with what it's supposed to be. It feels like a kind of a low rate kind of public access TV, American TV documentary from the late 90s. It really has that feel that it feels authentic, and that's what I feel like it's important for this kind of found footage kind of films. It gave me a little bit of a Lake Mungo vibe in that way, which is easily my favorite of the kind of found footage films, even though again it's more of a documentary than found footage. So yeah, I was quite intrigued by this. It's a little slow moving. It's not scary. I have to say I didn't really find it scary at all, but I just found it strangely gripping, this story, until, and I try not to spoil it too much, but until the end, when it totally drops the ball, and it's with this ridiculously stupid twist. It's like, what? And then not only is the twist absurd, it breaks out of this documentary style that was working really well for me. It kind of breaks the fourth wall and turns into like a film, like it's shot like a film. It's hard to explain without totally spoiling the film, but it totally breaks out of what I was enjoying about it before, and it ruins the film, which is a real shame because I was totally on board with it before that. But I do still think it's worth watching. As I say, it's amazing what they did with the money. I mean, it looks cheap. So when I say it's amazing, maybe not amazing is probably the wrong word. But just the fact that they went out there, they didn't have money, but they had some cameras and they had the enthusiasm. And basically the two directors, who were Stefan Avalos and Lance Weiler, they did pretty much everything themselves. They say on the credits there's quite a few names on there, but to be honest, they made up a lot of them, and it was pretty much just them doing most of the work. So you've got to admire them. You've got to appreciate what they did. And as I say, they made something that wasn't really around. I mean, it was not the first mockumentary. There was stuff like David Holtzman's Diary from the 60s, which inspired them. But it was kind of the first of this style of horror movie that was using the format. So it's a film I admire, and for the most part I enjoyed, but it totally drops the ball at the end. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if anyone else has seen it. It's one of these ones that's kind of known about because of Blair Witch, but I don't know how many people have actually sat and watched it.
Yeah, I've seen it. I saw this in the aughts, the 2000s, and when there was kind of like a influx of a lot of found footage movies, and for whatever reason, I've gotten over this since, but I really had a issue with found footage movies. Like if it was a found footage movie, I just didn't like it. And a lot of it has to do with just how, by design, they're going to end badly. Yeah. And I never, am just never emotionally satisfied by that. I've since gotten over that. And but I agree with you, Dave, that the ending of this one, similar to Late Night with the Devil, which is a movie that just came out this year, goes into like a just traditional film mode at the end. And I think that kind of spoils the effect for me. Whereas like Blair Witch or other movies kind of keep up with that for the whole runtime. Stick to the bit, Yeah. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying about how it's really compelling to begin with, and it's made even more impressive because of it's only made for $900. So yeah, I too admire it. I wouldn't say that I like it or would want to revisit it again, but actually now that you are talking about it, you kind of made me want to revisit it. So
yeah. I think, to be honest, I got one of these kind of limited edition box sets, the Blu-ray box sets of it, and I actually probably enjoyed the extra features as much as the film. It's really, really interesting to see how they made it, and they were also surprisingly innovative in different ways as well. It was actually, they claim it was the first all digital release of a film. So because digital theaters weren't really quite a thing yet, they had to actually they hired or bought a digital projector. And they just carried it to film festivals because they couldn't afford to put the film onto 35mm at prints and things. So they just carried this digital projector with them to show it through a laptop or a DVD, whatever it was. So it was quite groundbreaking in a number of ways. And they also kind of one of the things that inspired them to make the film was kind of the Adobe Premiere, the kind of digital non-linear editing hardware, was just kind of getting more popular and affordable, and that helped them too. So it was shot digitally. It was before that was quite as popular. So it's surprisingly innovative, even if it's not wholly successful.
Well, obviously it had some kind of impact because we're talking about a film that was made for $900 26 years ago, and we're still talking about it here today. I think that's impressive. I haven't seen the film. I vaguely remember hearing something about it because of the connection with Blair Witch, because I remember the Jersey Devil phrase, and I know that there was a connection there with some mythological thing that's going on there in New Jersey, and I said, oh, okay, so it's the same kind of premise, but I never followed up on it.
The one thing I could say is that some people, I think, initially claimed Blair Witch ripped it off, but I think people have looked into it, and production of Blair Witch began a few months before the last broadcast was ever shown, so they couldn't have ripped it off. It just happened to get there earlier.
It's that confluence of events that brings things together. So we get Armageddon, Deep Impact in the same year, and we get the last broadcast and Blair Witch within a year of each other. Well, my next film is it's an odd choice, and it's kind of an unfortunate reason that I'm picking it. It's the last Brian De Palma film that I truly loved. I was a big Brian De Palma fan through most of the 70s and 80s. His films fascinated me. I could watch Body Double 3 times a week and be happy. It just is, and Blowout, Dress to Kill are frequent plays. I think I watch them annually, easily, without even thinking about it. And The Untouchables, every time it's available someplace on a big screen, I go to see it. Snake Eyes is the last film that I felt like Brian De Palma was making a movie that I was interested in seeing. And, it's got one of those over-the-top Nick Cage type performances in it. It's also set with a natural disaster going on in the background. There's a hurricane on the coast there in Atlantic City while this big fight is going on, and there's just, obviously, we know right away that who the villain is in the piece. It's not hard to pick out. You just look for, well, who's the co-star? And there they are. So, and it's one of those movies that is shot in a manner that I think really reflects, Brian De Palma's aesthetic. It's interesting. There are some nice long takes. There are sustained shots. It's got interesting points to it. I enjoyed the film. I'm not sure what happened after this with De Palma and me, at least. I know other people like some of the films that came subsequently to this, but Black Dahlia was a big disappointment. Femme Fatale, it didn't react to me the same way, and Domino, I didn't even bother seeing. So it's just one of those things that's strange to me.
You said that this is the last one that you were interested in seeing. It also feels like the last one he was interested in making.
I think that's why. Yeah.
He seemed like a director for hire after that. I did see Domino, and there's just none of the Brian De Palma that we grew up with in that movie.
It's bad. It's really bad. Yeah.
And Snake Eyes is not prime De Palma. It's got a great opening sequence, but that's the last movie of his where you can tell it's a De Palma film. After that, nothing of him remained in his other movies.
Yeah, I think that might very well be the explanation for why it's the last one that I really loved. And like I said, his films were always so hypnotic to me, and I was never hypnotized by anything after this.
Yeah, I absolutely love this film too. I was considering putting it on my list and actually started to take some notes, but thought that maybe somebody else might put it on their list. So,
There you go.
yeah, I agree. I totally agree that it's the last great Brian De Palma film. I saw this in the theater and was completely blown away. It's maybe the film that's closest to Blowout, and that it's like kind of a conspiracy and a duplicitous or sort of anti-hero lead, just as John Travolta was in Blowout. And it's, his collaborations with David Koepp, Mission Impossible and Carlito's Way. I think those were great films in the 90s, and this was his last, I believe, collaboration with David Koepp. And I wish they would have, just kept collaborating, because they made some great stuff together.
Well, I'm glad that I'm not the only one who felt that way. Brian, what's your next film?
Mine is, you may know it as Show Me Love or Fucking Amal. It's a Swedish film by Lukas Moodysson, who is kind of a renegade in Swedish cinema. He's often making stories about like outsiders and alternative lifestyles. This one I only discovered recently. Their Arrow put out a really nice Blu-ray box set of a bunch of Moodyson's films, and this I think is the first one in there. And it's just it's a nice little coming out story about two teen girls. One is sort of an introverted girl who isn't, sort of obsessed with a popular girl, and the popular girl is too cool for school, and starts initially teasing kind of the outsider, and then realizes, I kind of like this girl. And it's just about, two girls not being ashamed anymore that they're queer. It's shot with really like handheld camera work and grainy film stock, and it feels very almost like you're really there and you're really in these people's lives. And but then there's sort of like this renegade spirit throughout. The title, at least the American title, Show Me Love, is a reference to the Swedish song by Robin. I don't know if you remember it. It's not in Swedish, it's in English, but it's a very popular tune from the 90s that always gets stuck in my head whenever I think about this, so I'll probably be singing that song to myself throughout the day. But it was the kind of movie where I wish I had seen this when I was in high school. I probably would have resonated with it a lot more than I did today, and it felt like a lot of teen movies in the 90s seemed really superficial and very cliquey, as my high school experience was. And I was, sort of an outsider in high school, and probably would have identified a lot with the characters at this time. So yeah, I found it very moving and very very tender. The performances seem really natural, and if you're not familiar with Moodysson's work, I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed all of his films that were in this box set, and this was my favorite of them.
Yeah, I've actually got the same box set. It was on my list to watch for this podcast, and I just didn't quite get around to it. It was I was waiting because I knew my wife wanted to see this one, and I was waiting for a night for us both to watch something. It just never came around in time. And but yeah, because I love. I've seen a couple of Moodysson's films. I've seen Together, or Till Salmon's, where it's called, and We Are the Best, and I love both those films. So I've been very keen to check this out, but I just didn't get around to it. But
yeah, it's as good or even better than those two. I agree that Together and We Are the Best are like top tier for him.
Cool. Other than the box set, do you know if it's available streaming someplace?
I think it is, yeah. I think you can rent it wherever you rent movies, yeah.
All right. Dave Anderson, it's your turn again.
Okay, my next one was more or less overshadowed, on this side of the pond anyway, by its American remake, The Ring, and all the sequels that followed. But the original Japanese film, Ringu, pretty much kicked off the J-horror craze. It was not that I didn't like the American version of The Ring, but it was a huge hit and seen by a lot of people who probably didn't even know this one existed. The plot is the same. The VHS tape that when you watch it results in your death 7 days later. And even though the American version is good, there's something about the original Ringu that just feels creepier. And the ramifications of viewing the tape seem more ominous. And I think some of that could be due to its budget. Like so many other horror classics, sometimes limited resources force a director to find more creative ways to, instill that fear. And to me, a lot of the sense of fear in this one is created by the performances and the bleak production design, rather than special effects. Because it's not a flashy film, but it's got loads of atmosphere and haunting imagery and a great music score. And I really like the slow burn, methodical pace of this one. It's the movie's never openly terrifying, but
dread.
Dread. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. The TV scene for me still is pretty terrifying.
It is, yeah. And even though you kind of know what's coming, I do blame this one though for the J-horror overkill that kind of overran theaters here in America anyway, with a lot of crappy remakes. But I revisited this with my daughter, who's a big fan of horror, and she fell in love with this one, even after seeing a lot of the Americanized stuff. She just loved the pacing of this one and how low key it was.
Yeah, I think this is one of the few arguments for there's a certain kind of film that works best on VHS. And I think in subsequent viewings where they've kind of cleaned it up, or I've tried streaming this, it just doesn't work as well. There was something about back in the late 90s putting this VHS in and really being creeped out by the form of it. And if you put a DVD in, it's just, or you're just streaming it just doesn't have the same effect.
I must admit, this reminds me of a story when I actually watched this. It wasn't the first time I watched it, but we watched it with my brother and some of our friends, and there was an option. This was actually the DVD. On the DVD, there was an option to watch the tape. So we're like, oh yeah, let's watch it. So you watch the tape. But then as soon as it finished, the phone rang. But the creepy thing was we picked up the phone and there was no answer. And it's like, oh my God, absolutely terrifying. Basically what happened, my dad, it was in our house we had two handsets, and my dad couldn't find the other phone. So you can press a button to find the other phone, so it makes it ring. And it was purely that.
Good
but the
times.
timing was just perfect.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, scared the life out of us.
Oh, if my kids had been watching this, I would have done the same thing. Damn it. Well, I did see Ringu after I saw The Ring, the American version of it, and I like both of them quite well. And I have vague recollections of it because it has been 15 years since I saw either of those movies. But I do remember liking it quite well, and it having, like you said, that distinct, Japanese horror, the Asian horror kind of stuff came in waves back then, and we got a lot, like you said, a lot of things that got remade that were not as good, but this was solid both ways. And I do think that, let's face it, if you're talking about a movie where the curse is from playing a videotape and you're watching a videotape, that just adds something to the experience. How do you get around that? Well, Matthew's next film is my next film, so I'm going to wait to talk about it. I'm going to skip over Matthew. He's not here. He can't object. We'll skip over it and talk about it when I get to my turn. Aaron's next movie is a movie he hates that everyone loves, and it's come up a couple of times already, and that's Armageddon. And he says, me saying hate once again leaves me a little cold because I merely dislike this movie a lot more than others. I also get that not everyone loves this movie, but it has its fair share of fans. That said, while I'm aware Michael Bay will always be a controversial filmmaker to bring up, but he has a good amount of films I enjoy, several I don't, and others that are just kind of whatever to me. Armageddon is somewhere within those later two categories, but it's far from being a film I like. Overlong, spectacularly dumb, and full of unearned sentiment, it's easy to see why this film became a huge hit in spite of itself. That said, the Bruckheimer aspect means that we have tons of great character actors scattered throughout the film, which helps. Still, my main gripe has always stayed the same. The film is so incredibly ugly. For a director who knows how to compose great imagery, even when assaulted by his editing, Armageddon revels in mushy, dark colors that relieves it of so much of the fun that it could ideally be having. As a note, I don't think Deep Impact is all that better, for the record, and long live the core.
Long live the core.
That's Aaron's take on Armageddon. Does anybody want to be an Armageddon defender here?
No, I will agree with Dave that Deep Impact holds up better. I think if you had asked me in 1988 what was the better movie, I would have said Armageddon, but I've since just it's unwatchable today. Like I was gonna watch it during COVID, and I just couldn't get through. Like I got 20 minutes in and I was just like, oh, this is awful. And then I watched Deep Impact and I was like, oh, this is like an actual movie. There's characters and things happening that I care about. And Armageddon is just such a commercial of a movie. It just, his aesthetic is just, I can't get over it. I'm not a Michael Bay fan at all. So,
it was edited with a weed whacker. And
right. I remember taking a film course where we were looking at like shot length, and it was like, Michael Bay in general, but specifically Armageddon, it was like, 1 second shot average or something like that. So it was just unbelievable, unwatchable for me. I can't get through it anymore.
I'm not a Michael Bay fan either, but I do have to maybe shamefully admit I enjoyed his last film, Ambulance, quite a bit. I don't know how many. Maybe it's because I was expecting a Michael Bay film this time, but that one kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But this one, yeah, I saw it in the theater, and I just thought it paled in comparison to Deep Impact. It does have a good performance by Billy Bob Thornton, who's not in the movie enough. But yeah, to me, when people talk about Michael Bay, this represents everything that's wrong with his directing style.
Yeah.
Well, I won't talk too much about the movie, but because I think everybody has the same general opinion about this. But I do have one of those things that I like to share. One of the things that I do in my sites is talk about my personal experiences with this. I saw this movie at 7 o'clock in the morning with a radio show audience. The local radio DJs did a screening, and because they'd had, I think, Billy Bob on the show and talking about it, and they had Michael Bay, Jerry Bruckheimer, and Billy Bob Thornton all showed up to talk about the movie after the screening. So we saw the movie at 7 o'clock in the morning. It went until whatever it was, 9:15, 9:20, something like that, and then we got 30 minutes of listening to the three guys who were primarily responsible for it talk about it. And the screening was down in Hollywood. It was a lot of fun. Had a great time. They gave us T-shirts, Armageddon T-shirts that we wore. That was kind of like everybody's put on their Armageddon T-shirt. So it was a lot of fun seeing the movie. The movie not so great, but the experience was fun.
Nice.
All right. The movie that I was mentioning before that was also on Matthew's list and is on my list, my category here is it's the only movie I saw in 1998 that I didn't see in my hometown. I grew up in Southern California. I lived there all of my life up until the last 4 years. And so in Southern, I went to see everything in Hollywood, Pasadena, the San Gabriel Valley, all that area. I saw this movie in San Francisco in December in bad weather. I'm not exactly sure why we picked it, except that it was probably something that the kids could see. We were with our kids that weekend, and anyway, like I said, I saw it in San Francisco on a dingy day. It was a great trip with the kids. It's called Waking Ned Devine, and it's one of those. Well, I don't want to say British film because I'm sure the Irish people would be upset about that, but it's one of those films from that part of the world that frequently appeared around that time that I enjoyed immensely. I think they made a comparison in the advertising to the Full Monty, which I had loved the year before, and I really liked this film. I haven't seen it in 20 years, and I watched it yesterday, and I remembered why I liked it so well. It's just full of charm. It's got interesting characters. The two leads in it, Ian Bannon and David Kelly, are great. They're a lot of fun. And those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's basically a story about a very small town in Ireland with maybe 56, 57 residents, and one of them has won the lottery. And at the beginning of the movie, nobody knows who won the lottery, and the two old guys are trying to figure out how to ingratiate themselves with whoever won the lottery, and they're trying to figure out who will have won the lottery. This is, of course, in the days before the internet, so it was not widely known that the winner was in their town, and it takes them a while to discover that it's a friend of theirs who basically died of shock when he discovered that he'd won the lottery. And the ticket, of course, has already been signed, so it has to be claimed by him, and he's dead. And so the whole town basically gets let in on the secret, and they perpetuate a massive fraud on the lottery, trying to claim the winnings for the town people. And it's a lot of fun. It's full of quirky characters, some of whom are not particularly pleasant, many of whom are have good personalities and sad lives, but the story is interesting one, and it's told in a charming way. It's relatively brief, so it's easy for people to digest, and it's a movie that I don't think I've heard anybody talk about since it came out, but I'm sure that some of you have seen it.
Yeah, I've seen this one. It's called Waking Ned in the UK, but yeah, I remember enjoying this a lot too. It was. I don't know how well it did in the US, but it did do pretty well in the UK. It was. So it was a lot of fun. It's been a long time. I've not seen it since the cinema though, but I do remember enjoying it quite a lot.
Yeah, I remember it too. And like you, Richard, I kind of associated this with the Full Monty, maybe because I think they're both Fox Searchlight or something. But yeah, I remember seeing it and enjoying it, and you talking about it makes me want to watch it again. But it's been 25 years since I watched it, so I barely remember anything.
Well, again, like I said, I'm frequently focused on my memories that are tied into my life when I see a movie. And we happened to be in San Francisco. We were doing Christmas shopping. By the way, I mentioned President Clinton earlier. This is when all that story was breaking, and there were headlines in the newspapers as we were walking around about the whole Clinton affair thing going on, and it was just wild. And it actually snowed in San Francisco that weekend, which it doesn't do. San Francisco is not one of those places that gets snow. Yeah, it was very strange. But it was an interesting experience, and I remembered the movie pretty much, even though I'd only seen it, like I said, the most recent watch was 20 years ago. But as I was watching it yesterday, I said, oh, yeah, I remember probably about 80% of it. There was 20% it was fresh to me again, and I enjoyed that. All right, I skipped over David Brooks. Brooke, what was I thinking? My goodness, I was just in a rush here. David, what was your next movie?
Okay, well, the next movie, I'm going to Hong Kong this time, and I'm going to talk about something that was just fun, stupid but fun. And this is a film called The Demon's Baby. So yeah, this is about it starts off with a voiceover tells us how there's 5 evil spirits have been kept in these kind of special vessels for a long time, kind of guarded, and they're guarded by a golden Buddha. So this golden Buddha statue stops them from being unleashed, these evil spirits. And basically these spirits want to find pregnant hosts. And if they're all born, they could turn into demons that would destroy the world. So we flash forward to, I think it's the early 20th century. And this kind of rambunctious general, he finds these vessels and thinks, oh, I like those, and I'll keep them at home. And he takes them home. And it goes on from there. And there's one night, this general's feeling a bit horny, and he happens to have 4 wives. And he has his way with all 4 of them in this one night. And also there's the kind of hero of the film is this guy called Six. and he takes a fancy to this girl called Yu, who's kind of another servant. They're both servants, kind of in this kind of fortress or whatever. And he gets down and dirty with her too. And the demons find this chance. They manage to. Somebody knocks over the golden Buddha, and all the spirits go out into these ladies who've just got some. Basically, try to put this in the nicest way. So then mayhem ensues. They become that, like, their pregnancy is sped up. They get giant bellies very quickly, but then things go horribly wrong, and their bellies open up to massive jaws of death that start sucking in and eating everybody in their path, and the film turns into some kind of crazy Evil Dead bloody mayhem. So it just it's this. I had a lot of fun with this. I've got quite a soft spot for the kind of Hong Kong horror comedies. Especially the Mr. Vampire films, which are loads of fun. I think I've talked about them on one of the podcasts before.
Yeah, those are great.
And this kind of has a similar vibe. Again, it's got one of these kind of Taoist priests who, and he's played by the utterly amazing Anthony Wong, who's one of the greatest Hong Kong actors, or the most enjoyable at least. And he's really over the top, playing this kind of Taoist monk who knows how to defeat demons, and he tries to help Six to stop all these evil demons. It's just goofy fun. It takes a while until the kind of hardcore, ultra gory horror kicks in. It's probably about halfway through. But I was kind of going along with it anyway. It was fun. It was silly, and surprisingly effective kind of romance between Six and Yu, which also leads to a surprisingly poignant finale after watching all these demon babies and like savage kind of hungry pregnant bellies and things like this. It's got some surprisingly effective emotional beats in there as well. So I had fun. It's not a great film. It wasn't quite as all round entertaining as Mr. Vampire, but it's a good laugh if you're into some super gory kind of utterly ludicrous kind of comedy horrors, and your kind of East Asian takes on that, then give it a shot. It definitely has an Evil Dead vibe, especially there's some of the crazy. There's occasionally throws the camera around a little bit like Sam Raimi too. So yeah, it's worth a watch, but don't expect a masterpiece. But it's fun. It's fun.
Well, the description really makes me want to watch it. I just went looking for it. It's not available anyplace.
Yeah, I was looking for it too.
It's on. No, I tell you, you can find it. Cause I imported it from the US. It's on. I think it's Vinegar Syndrome. It's a triple. A triple bill Blu-ray called Made in Hong Kong. I think it's Volume 1 or something. Right. But yeah, I think it's called Made in Hong Kong. But yeah, you get 3 movies on there, and they're all kind of extreme. I don't know if they're all horror, but they're all kind of extreme Hong Kong madcap adventures.
Good deal. Like I said, the description that you gave of it made me want to see it.
Yeah.
And then I looked up.
It's really silly.
I looked it up on IMDb, and he says there's one of these reviews that says, at one point I almost died from laughter when 2 guys are playing soccer with an embryo and trying to put it back in the woman's womb. I'm quite. Okay. This sounds like fun.
As I say, you've got to wait about half the film until the real mayhem kicks in. But but if you can go along with the goofy comedy in the first half, just stick with it.
All right, Brian, what's your last film?
So I kind of made a shift here as we've been talking. I have picked some pretty serious movies. I was going to talk about Hu Xiaoshen's Flowers of Shanghai, but I'm making a pivot to Star Trek Insurrection, which as a kid, I grew up watching Star Trek Next Generation religiously. It was on at I think 9 and 10 o'clock, and every night would end with Star Trek: The Next Generation. I really enjoyed Generations and First Contact when they came out, and Insurrection was sort of a disappointment for a lot of people. It got described as just an extended episode, like the story wasn't that big of a deal for a lot of people, but I don't know, for me an extended episode of Next Generation was was a great thing. That's amazing. That sounds, I want more movies that are like extended episodes of the show. It's the story involves this planet that's in this little nebula called the Briar Patch, where this culture called the Baku live for years and years and years, because there's some weird phenomenon that makes them young and sort of heals their heals wounds, heals diseases, and just keeps them perpetually youthful. So when the Enterprise goes to kind of investigate I guess data malfunctions, because he kind of finds out that the Federation is trying to exploit and move these people. So it sort of becomes a forced relocation story about a government power trying to move people to exploit their resources. And I think that at the time I didn't really I wasn't politically minded, I guess, and now watching it, it's a film that resonates and with several historical parallels. I was always fascinated by the response to this, because a lot of critics poo-pooed it. I remember Roger Ebert's review arguing that these people should be moved, which was really disturbing to me at the time and made me kind of question what are you talking about, Roger Ebert? But there's just a lot of fun sequences in it. I don't think it's I don't know that it's great cinema or anything, but as a Next Generation fan, it's solidly directed by Jonathan Frakes, who, for my money, is the best director to work in that franchise. And there's many entertaining sequences. There's a Data singing, from the HMS Pinafore, and kind of some interesting character developments with everyone getting younger. It's not a perfect movie. It's not, First Contact or even The Voyage Home in terms of Star Trek. But as a diehard, lifelong Next Generation fan, I will go to bat with this one, because I think it's so well made and just a solid Next Generation story.
Well, I got another one of those personal stories I got to throw in here just by accident. We'd bought a car, a used car actually, but it was new for us, a small blue Saturn wagon. This is back in the days when Saturn was relatively new. And when we bought the car, we were told by the salespeople that the car had been rented to be used in an advertisement. And the people who had rented it wanted to know if we were still interested in letting them use it for the ad. And the reason that they had to use it is because it was for an ad in a country that has anti-competition laws, where you can't show a car that is a competitor's automobile, and the Saturns were not sold in this. It was a South American country. I don't remember which one it was. So they really needed this car. And we said, sure. And said, come on down. We're going to film it. You guys can eat at the Honey Wagon and watch us film the commercial and all that kind of stuff. We were there all day long. Nothing more boring than watching people put tape on the ground over and over again. It's, really, and of course, while that was going on, I drifted off and walked over on the Paramount lot and watched them film 20 or 30 minutes of this movie.
Oh, really?
Yes. From a distance. I was kind of like a half a block away watching them film outside on part of the lot. And it was kind of cool knowing that it was a Star Trek movie. I was a Star Trek fan. I don't remember the movie that well. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I don't remember enjoying it as much as the other Star Trek films that featured the Next Generation cast. So I should probably revisit it. But like I said, I did watch them film part of it. And you guys get stuck with these old man stories. Sorry about that.
I mean, for me personally, my dad and I, every night we would watch, those back-to-back Star Trek episodes, and we would always go see, the Star Trek movies together. And I don't know, he passed away a year and a half ago, so now I just have this sort of, strong emotional bond and maybe irrational love of all things Next Generation, because it just reminds me of spending time with him. So, I despite all that, I've always really liked the movie, and I've always sort of been taken aback by the hate around this particular movie. So I do enjoy it and have revisited it many times over the years.
Good deal. Dave Anderson, what's your last film?
Okay, my last film. This one was on my list of my favorite films of 1998. It's my third favorite film. And at the time, it was released in the summer, but it was kind of overshadowed by the much bigger blockbusters that were released around the same time. And that's The Negotiator, with Samuel L. Jackson and Kevin Spacey, and the late great J.T. Walsh, who I've just always been fascinated with. No one played seedy little bad guys quite like him. But I don't know how many of you have seen this.
Yeah, I've seen this.
Yeah. So Jackson plays Danny Roman. He's a hostage negotiator, suspected of murdering his partner, and but he knows he's being framed. And before he can be arrested, he takes hostages in the Internal Affairs Office because he suspects the inspector, who's played by Walsh, is in on this embezzlement scam. And he demands a particular hostage negotiator named Chris Sabian, played by Spacey, mainly because he doesn't know Spacey very well and he has no stake in the outcome. And most of the movie is the standoff between Sabian, Roman, and the police. All of them who either want Danny dead because they're in on this conspiracy or they think he's a cop killer. But after a while, Sabian begins to believe Danny's claim of being set up might have merit. The movie's a little bit long, but it's a great story. I've always been a sucker for standoff stories, especially in one setting, in one night. So there's kind of a Die Hard vibe there. And the relationship between Spacey and Jackson's character is just fascinating to me. And it's directed by F. Gary Gray, who I think has always been one of the more underrated action directors out there. He's kind of moved on since then, but he also directed some other great action films like Set It Off and Law Abiding Citizen, which to me is one of the most underappreciated revenge movies ever made. But yeah, this one, of all the movies that we've talked about, this is probably the one I would rewatch the most. It's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, I remember really liking it. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I remember, I think it came out in the summer of 1998, but being just super excited about it because I was such a huge Samuel Jackson fan, and at the time Kevin Spacey fan, maybe not so much anymore, but and maybe the whole Spacey of it all has prevented me from rewatching it, but I should get over that and just watch it again.
For some reason, I was put off by the trailers for this movie, and so I never bothered to catch up with it. And I know next to nothing about it, but it sounds a lot more intriguing from your description than from what I was seeing in the trailer. Well, Matthew's last film, I'm anxious to see. I don't know why I haven't seen it for 26 years, because it's a movie that I know that I'm interested in seeing. I just haven't caught up with it yet, and it's The Spanish Prisoner from David Mamet. So those of you who have seen it, you're welcome to talk about it, but don't give anything away, because I know it's a long con kind of film. It features David Mamet, who did House of Games, and I know Ricky Jay is in it, and I'm interested in seeing it. I just haven't had a chance for some reason. In 26 years, I couldn't find 2 hours to watch the damn movie. What's wrong with me?
It's outstanding. I'm a huge fan of this movie. I was actually considering putting this on my list. Really solid performances all around, and different kind of performance from Steve Martin. And then you just have Rebecca Pidgeon kind of becoming who she would, the sort of character that she would be in subsequent David Mamet films where she's just hard to trust or hard to get a handle on, but really really fascinating nonetheless, and a good kind of romantic lead. And yeah, it's a con movie, but it's so simple that like you feel stupid at the end, like, oh, of course this is what happened, but you can't see it coming. It's really like subtle, elegant filmmaking, and it has a device, like a MacGuffin, where it doesn't matter what it is. It's sort of like North by Northwest in that respect, where they're talking about it the whole movie, but you never really find out what it is, and it's driving all the action. But it's just this. It's MacGuffin. It has no particular meaning, and I really always loved that about it too. But yeah, this is one of his best films. I really love it.
Yeah, this is my kind of introduction to David Mamet, actually, and I love it too. I mean, it's way too long since I've seen it to comment in any detail, but I do remember liking it a lot.
Well, thank you for not giving anything away and giving me more encouragement to catch up on something that I've meant to see for, like I said, literally 26 years. I got to shame myself into pulling the trigger on this. Well, David, Brook, I'm not going to skip you this time. What's your last film?
Well, for what you could probably call genre films, or close enough, I'm going to move way over now into kind of full-on art house with a capital A. So I watched this is one I watched just a couple of nights ago. The others I watched quite a while ago, and I felt like I needed another rewatch because a lot of the films were a little hit and miss anyway. So I took a gamble and I went with a film. I've got a Blu-ray set called The Poetic Trilogy by a director called Mohsen Makhmalbaf. I probably pronounced that horribly wrong. But yeah, he is an Iranian director, I believe. And and the film is called The Silence, or otherwise known as Sock Out. I don't know how to pronounce that. But yeah, it's quite a simple kind of premise. The story's not very strong in this. It's about a young boy. I think he's about 10. He's called Korsid, and he's blind. He can't see. And he kind of follows his kind of day-to-day activities over the course of a few days. And every morning he gets the bus to work, and he works at an instrument maker's shop. He helps tune the instruments. But what happens is along the way, when on his way to work, he keeps getting distracted. He keeps getting distracted by sounds, by pretty sounds, as he puts it. So a pretty voice, if he'll start listening to a pretty voice and what they're saying, he'll get distracted. Or music, if he hears some music, he wants to follow it. He wants to find out where the music's coming from. And this keeps distracting him and taking away, so he keeps being late for work all the time. And his boss eventually kind of fires him, which is bad because he is the kind of breadwinner in his family. Because his father left him a few years ago, so he's having to bring in the money for his mum. And and that's pretty much kind of it. It's a film that I wasn't quite sure what they were saying with it. Reading some of the blurb, I haven't had a chance to watch the special features and things, but reading the blurb, it's supposedly inspired by the ideas of Sufism, which I know nothing about, so it's not a surprise I was lost on it. But saying that, I was hypnotized by this film. It is beautiful. It looks incredible. It's got a fantastic use of color. Each shot is composed really beautifully. But even more powerfully than that is the use of sound and music. It really plays with this idea of having this kind of protagonist who can't see, and so the sound effects and the music are really heightened, but at the same time they're kept fairly minimal. It doesn't overblow it. It's not like a Hollywood where the mix is up to 11 and you can hear billions of different sound effects exploding at once. I really liked the film a lot, even if I didn't always have a grasp on what was going on. I just found it as I enjoyed it just as a celebration of sound and of music, and I was just kind of swept along in the mind of this boy. Really, I could kind of sympathise with him and his his problems with focusing, because the world can sound so beautiful, and I was kind of touched by that. So yeah, a really nice film to end on, even if it was super outhouse and super kind of difficult to pin down. I enjoyed it a lot.
Sounds great.
The description is very interesting and intriguing, and when you say you're not sure what the point is, I'm not sure that it needs to have a point if the story is interesting enough.
Well,
I'm okay with the characters.
I'd say there's not a huge amount of story. It is kind of almost like what I had described. There's not a huge amount of story either, but it's just strangely captivating, I guess is the way. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, hopefully somebody will be captivated as a result of hearing your recommendation here. My last movie is the movie from 1998 that I most recommend to people. It's one that I have loved from the moment I saw it. It's perfect for me as a child of the 1970s, growing up and listening to music from that era. It's based on a fictional rock band. It's Still Crazy.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh yeah.
I'm glad that you guys are familiar with it. I watch it every few years. It's been a few since I saw it last. I watched it yesterday, and once again, I just love this movie. It is so funny, and it has such great characters in it. It was my introduction to Bill Nighy and Timothy Spall. This is the first movie I remember seeing them in. I may have seen them in movies before this, but this is the first one I remember seeing them in. Stephen Ray was great. I'd seen him in The Crying Game a few years before. And it's about a rock band from the 70s that has fallen apart, and it's 20 years later, and they attempt a kind of a comeback. You know, there are deceased members of the band. There are mysteriously missing members of the band. They weren't the biggest band in the world, but they were one that was widely loved. And I think of bands that I liked from that era that kind of fit into the same category. I enjoy Foghat. Thin Lizzy is one of my favorite bands. Never the biggest bands in the world, but always solid and having something to get people going. And there's a line in the movie that comes from the woman who is she was the gopher in their first incarnation. Now she's trying to manage them in a comeback, and she says it out loud. She says, "I want to stand in the dark with an audience feeling the same thing that I feel." That's why she's really doing this. It's not for the money, it's not for the glory, it's not for the fame. It's because she loved the music. And there are moments in this film where the music works. And I'm not a musician. I'm just a fan of pop music from that era, and there are 2 or 3 moments in this where they just strike the perfect chord, and the final song is one that just makes me feel like, yeah, this was a song. I'm sure this was a song from the 1970s. And every time Bill Nighy's on screen, I just laugh because he's just hysterical in this movie.
He's hilarious, and you're right. The songs are actually really good. It's not like Spinal Tap satire. What I liked about that film is I was expecting another movie similar to This Is Spinal Tap, and it is often just as funny, but it's also quite sweet at times, and even touching on occasion.
Oh, I definitely think you feel for all of these guys at some point or other in the movie, and like I said, I think the last moments really managed to get a nice emotional reaction from you. If anybody hasn't seen it, please make sure to put it on your list of things to see, because you'll feel better about the world afterwards.
I did see it back in, I don't know, in the late 90s, I guess, or 99 or something probably, when it came out on video, and I saw it because I was obsessed with Stephen Ray, largely from The Crying Game and his other work with Neil Jordan, and I mean, I knew Bill Nye, obviously I know who he is now, but at the time it was like I didn't make a mental note that he was in this. Same with Timothy Spall. So I sort of forgot about this movie until you mentioned it, and seeing all the people in it makes me really want to rewatch it. So I will be doing that soon.
Well, that's the hope for this show, that everybody will find something that they'll want to go out and look for and see, something that they remembered enjoying and are going to come back to it. Those of you who haven't heard of a movie, I'm going to seek out The Demon's Baby. I have to see this movie.
I was trying to look it up whilst you were talking, and I think it must have been deleted, that set that I've got. I can't find it anyway. But eBay might be your friend. But yeah, it's Made in Hong Kong Volume 1. I think it's a Vinegar Syndrome.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to dig for that. I think it might be deleted, unfortunately.
Vinegar Syndrome's site, I think, is closed because they're June member event right now, so you can't get on their site.
It might come back then. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll keep our fingers crossed. Dang. Well, that's been our show on 1998 Look Back. Hope you find something that you are looking forward to. We're going to take a quick break for a word from a fellow Lamb Podcasting Network show, and then we'll be back with our exit question of the week.
You are about to witness history in the making.
Hi there, this is Todd from Forgotten Films, and if you spend all your time watching new releases, then you need to broaden your movie horizons. And a great way to do that is by joining me for the Forgotten Filmcast. We don't talk about the new releases, we don't even talk about the classics. We talk about the movies that time forgot. On each episode, I'm joined by another film blogger to discuss a film that may or may not be worth rediscovering. So look for the Forgotten Filmcast on iTunes, Podomatic, and wherever you find great podcasts.
We're back, and it's time for the exit question of the week. It's pretty straightforward, I think. What film from 1998 could most use a remake, and whom would you cast from the acting pool of today to play the parts that were being portrayed 26 years ago? David Brook, did you think of something that would fit into this category for you, and who you might cast in it?
I'm going to be lazy, and I'm going to dip into my list, and I'm going to suggest, purely because I was so let down by the ending, is I want someone to remake The Last Broadcast. You could probably argue it's been remade loads of times with all the dozens of found footage horror movies we've got, but I want a film to kind of do it properly and stick to that kind of documentary style. But I think with a remake, he could play with that a bit more and maybe put it into the YouTube generation, have a bit more of a YouTube style. I guess you could say that's been done with The Host. But yeah, I think turn it into more of a YouTube documentary rather than the kind of public access TV documentary that it is. Could be an interesting spin on it. And just fix the ending. That's all I want. But in terms of who'd cast in it, I would actually, I'm going to be really lazy and say I wouldn't want anyone famous. I think it needs to be to be
stars
effective.
Makes sense.
Oh yeah, that's true. You could use. I don't know any YouTube stars because I'm old. I don't like.
I'm with you. I know.
But yeah, I would have either unknowns or YouTube stars might work to kind of keep it in fitting with the feel of something real that's
if
been
they
found.
tied it in with their own shows.
Oh yeah,
it would be a nice way to justify doing it in that documentary style and making a film. Like you said, I don't know any YouTube stars because I don't watch YouTube that way. I know that there are people out there that have huge followings. They've got 10 million people who follow them, and they do their own weekly or daily programs. But I don't know who any of these people are because I'm too damn old. Well, I like that suggestion, and I don't think that's too lazy. That works for me. Dave Anderson, how about you?
Yeah, I think the movie that really needs a remake is Sphere, based on Michael Crichton's sci-fi horror novel, which I read, and I thought it was downright scary at times. It's my favorite Crichton novel, and I was really excited to see this when it came out, but I was really let down. I think everybody involved in that movie really dropped the ball, which is a shame because the basic premise is so cool. I think it deserves another shot. And, if they could finally make a decent movie out of Dune, they can do it with this one. And for the original cast included Dustin Hoffman, Sharon Stone, and Samuel Jackson. I think in their roles, I just chose three actors that I admire. So Mark Ruffalo, Emily Blunt, and Jesse Plemons in those respective roles.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
That's a great suggestion. I like you. I read the book, loved it, saw the movie, and was totally disappointed. And yeah, I think it's worthy material for a nice Hollywood movie, nice big Hollywood movie.
Brian, have you got a suggestion for maybe a remake and some casting?
Yeah, the movie Disturbing Behavior always intrigued me, but it's so poorly executed that it just demands a remake. I think that it's kind of about, if you haven't seen it, it's about these mind control experiments on teenagers where they're getting a chip implanted into their head at a young age to make them sort of all the same. Very Stepford Wives-esque plot. I think updating it so that this idea could be worked to use more modern technology and maybe comment on the present issues specifically in American schools of banning books and limiting access to certain education about gender and sex and wanting to be sort of create this Christo-fascist world that we're starting to live in or are living in. So comment on that a little bit. I think for the cast, the original kind of Sporto was played by James Marsden. I think it should be played by Asante Black, who was in a couple of really good films last year, Story Avenue and Landscape with Invisible Hand. He's not really a well-known actor, but he's very talented based on those examples. Katie Holmes was the female lead, and I think that Kierman Shipka from Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and Totally Killer, neither of which I like, but I think she's a talented actress and could easily play a high schooler. Nick Stahl was sort of the bad boy in the original, and I think doing something that's a little, I don't know, are there bad boys in high school these days? I don't know. But Morgan Davies from Evil Dead Rise and Blaze, I think could represent sort of like a trans perspective that's being sort of shunned out by what in my re-envisioning of this is sort of a right-wing cleansing of difference. The principal, I think, or psychologist or something, the guy who was sort of behind it all was played by Bruce Greenwood in the original, and I think maybe like a Tilda Swinton character could be sort of creepy as like a mad scientist. There was a principal, I can't remember who played the principal offhand now, I'm forgetting, but maybe John Carroll Lynch as the principal. William Sadler played a sort of sympathetic janitor who sort of uncovers what's going on and then ends up getting killed. I think Scoot McNairy has kind of this desperate character who could play a janitor quite easily. And then Steve Railsback played the cop who was investigating, and Brian Tyree Henry has played this sort of role before. He may as well play it again. He was in the remake of Child's Play playing the resident cop, so I think he could handle that.
Well, you took this assignment quite seriously. You went deep on that. Lots of actors that you think would fit into those roles. I appreciate that. I've never seen Disturbing Behavior, so I don't have any opinion about whether or not these actors seem like they are appropriate, but your descriptions seem like they work pretty well.
Well, it's not very good. I wouldn't recommend it. But I'd watch a remake. So, yeah.
Especially if you put it together.
Sure. Yeah, right.
Yeah, my suggestion was one that came up in our discussion here, and that's Cube. The problem that I had with Cube when I saw it originally was that I thought they did a very good job given the limitation on their budget, and I thought it was interesting looking. I just think that they could have done more with it, and there's an interesting remake possibility here. As it turns out, there is a remake. I just discovered that this morning.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's a Japanese remake, and it's only like 2 or 3 years old. I don't know how well it worked. I've never seen it. Like I said, I just learned about it this morning when I was kind of doing a little bit of last-minute research on this. I was suggesting, contemporary actors for this. I didn't necessarily worry about the wide range of ages that they had in the original one. I was thinking, let's design this for a youthful group, but not necessarily, just teens. So, I put in Tom Holland as the office worker, who turns out to also be the accidental cube designer. Anya Taylor-Joy is the math student. Lucas Hedges is that character who's the escape artist who gets out of all the other prisons. Beanie Feldstein as the doctor who's also the conspiracy theorist. And as kind of a twist, Kelvin Harrison Jr. as the cop. I think that you could do when you cast the parts a little bit differently, that kind of justifies doing it. And of course, you now could have a bigger budget. There'll be more use of digital effects that I think would work in a film like this. It still would have to be relatively low budget, but I think, because let's face it, you're talking about a horror film that's basically just designed to show different ways to eviscerate people on screen. I'm up for that, and I just think you need interesting people. Obviously, I don't think you could afford all of these people.
Yeah, that sounds like a great remake idea.
So those are our ideas. Anybody who's got an extra few $1 million and wants to invest in doing this, feel free to contact us, because we should get an executive producer credit for this.
Yeah.
Before we go, though, I do want to give everybody on the show a chance to promote whatever they're doing right now and get our eyes and ears tuned to something. So, Dave Anderson, let's start with you. Have you got something that you want us to see or listen to?
Not see or listen to it, because I'm still old school. I do all my stuff I just write everything.
Well, that would be seeing. People forget reading is seeing.
I'm currently working on a top 10 list of what I think are the greatest sequences in the Godfather trilogy. I've been on a Francis Ford Coppola thing for a while now. Looking forward to seeing this new movie, so it's got me thinking a lot about the Godfather films.
I like it. I saw Godfather 2 on the big screen 2 nights ago.
Yeah, I just wrote about that not too long ago. That film again.
It's there are fantastic sequences in there that you could write about. Every sequence that is filled with extras in costume, doing elaborate background activity. I'm just overwhelmed at how they do that without using a bunch of CGI characters that you could just manipulate around in the background. That's one of those things where you have to have somebody, 14 production assistants and assistant directors writing herd on hundreds of extras. How do you get that to work? I don't know, but they did at least 3 sequences in Godfather 2 that involved that. Good enough. David Brook, I know that you've got tons of things that come into your possession that you review. Do you have something that you want us to pay attention to in addition to your podcast?
Yeah, I was just going to say we have relaunched our podcasting about 3 months ago, and still going strong. So check out the Blueprint Review podcast over at Blueprint Review. And business as usual. I'm always reviewing discs. I'm hopefully in the next day or two I will have a review of Bandits of Orgasolo and the Sympathy for the Underdog, which were both very good films. So I'm going to there should be some glowing reviews of those up soon.
Very nice. And Brian, what have you got that people can turn their eyes and ears to?
Just on my site, Deep Focus Review, I'm keeping up with new release reviews, and on my Patreon, I'm doing a retrospective of Bertrand Bonello, sort of working my way back. It's reviewed The Beast and his latest film, and I've just been going back from there. So next up is Zombie Child, and then Saint Laurent, and I'm writing a essay in my series called The Definitives, which is like scholarly essay type thing on Nocturama, his I think 2017 film.
Just as a curiosity, do you have an entry level on the Patreon, or is it just any donation gets people in?
There's a free option that you get like a every Monday I write a blog about what I'm going to be writing about and just kind of discuss general film things. So that's free. Otherwise, there's a $2. The lowest tier is $2, okay. And you get access to everything. Anything more than that, you can get to commission reviews and essays. So, actually, I really love the Reader's Choice selections. They're always picking unique things for me to write about that I would have maybe never gotten to on my own.
You got one from the recent couple of weeks that fits in that category that you can share with us?
Yeah. Now that I can't. Oh, the most recent one I did was last week. I did The Prestige, which I really enjoy that movie and I would have said back in 2006 that I loved that movie, but revisiting it, I took more of a, critical view of it and dug into some things that didn't really work for me this time. So, but it was a good review. I mean, I wrote almost 3,000 words on it, so it's a pretty sizable writing on my Patreon. So
nice, a good deep dive there.
Yeah,
excellent. Yeah, on my site, once again, I'm sticking with my general goal of talking about everything that I see in the theater. Eventually, you get a chance to read about it on the blog pages that I have. So I've just mentioned Godfather Part 2. Last week I also saw Phantom of the Paradise again, so there's some comments there. The Paramount Summer Film Classic series is going this summer, and I have a pass, and so I've got 3 or 4 older classic movies that I'm going to be talking about just about every week. So if you guys are into that kind of thing, expect to be hearing about all sorts of things. We've got Spinal Tap and Point Break and Roger Rabbit and the Muppet Movie and just a ton of stuff coming up this coming summer, and you'll be hearing from me about those things. And of course, I always want to point everybody who's listening to this show to the video version of the show, because I spent a lot of time trying to put it together, and I want to make sure people are looking at it. And holy criminy, that promotion this last week seemed to have worked, because Furiosa has the most views of any of the things I've put up, except the accidental views that Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein got. Because I know that 26,000 people did not listen to that show. They just went looking for Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein and found that and said, "Oh, that's not what I'm looking for." But I think more people are spending the time on the other ones that we've got going, and I appreciate that. So hopefully you guys will get around to that. Well, I appreciate everybody showing up for the show. I'm sorry that 2 of our guests couldn't make it for a variety of reasons, but we got their picks in, and like I said, I think everybody's found something that they're going to be looking forward to. So we're not going to be out of sight, but we are going to be out of mind for a week or so, because we have we're going to take a pause next week, but we'll be back soon. And those of you who are listening to the show, if you have suggestions for Movie of the Month, please send them in. If you have suggestions for programs that you would like to have us cover in the next couple of months, I'm going to put the schedule together this week. And, all of our guests here, this is a non-commercial enterprise. Everybody is doing this out of love for movies and talking about movies, and I appreciate everybody who takes time to spend some time with us each week on the Lambcast. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you all soon.
You've been listening to the Lambcast. If you have an idea for a show or would like to join us on the Lambcast, contact us at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Find us on Facebook, just search for Lambcast, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Lambcast. And you can find us on YouTube as well. The Lamb site can be found at largeassmovieblogs.com. We'd also love it if you would leave a review on iTunes.
Ha 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 ha!